Well, welcome back, America. Joining us now to talk about Russia and Ukraine and the consequences of that war back here at home is Congressman Austin Scott from the great state of Georgia. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Hey, John and Amanda, thanks for having us.
It's an honor to have you on, sir. I want to ask about what's happening here. We've seen the violence in Ukraine. We see how bad this war is. But here, oil prices are up. We're talking about a multiple increase in fertilizer prices, talks of a food shortage. How are Americans going to pay a price for this violence in the near future?
Yeah, so on food prices, it's going to cost our farmers somewhere around $300 to $400 an acre more to grow their crops. Based on what I'm hearing from our farmers, you've got tremendous potential for food shortage globally because of all of the trade in the Black Sea being shut down. You've got Russia and Ukraine are both countries that put a tremendous amount of wheat into the global market. And so Ukraine is responsible for about 50 million metric tons of corn and wheat going into the export markets on an annual basis. I think it's probably reasonable to expect that will not be in the world food supply. You've now got, and doing the right things, a lot of American manufacturers breaking their ties with Russia, companies like John Deere and Caterpillar and a lot of others that are involved in ag and production. And that's going to obviously impact the Russians' ability to grow their food. So it's I'm concerned about what's happening in America because we're going to be paying more for our groceries. I will tell you from a global standpoint, I think other countries are going to be faring far, far worse. And I've asked actually our areas of responsibility, our military leaders, to look into what a 5% reduction in the global food supply looks like from the standpoint of the geopolitical unrest and economics around the world.
Congressman, what do you think the limits of our involvement in Ukraine should be? Because I know that for a long time, Republicans had the reputation for being warmongers and very quick to hop into international conflict. But that's not the Republican Party of today. And you in Georgia, it is a red state. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, my constituents are horrified at what they're seeing with the Russians basically killing civilians indiscriminately. And so I don't know what the line will be if the Russians cross the chemical weapon line or if they cross with the use of a nuclear weapon. I mean, at some point, I think that NATO or the United Nations is going to at least have to engage in some type of humanitarian aspect, or the Russians are going to starve the Ukrainians to death with the just bombing their food supply. So I'm not sure what the line is, but I am sure that we shouldn't be telling things publicly about what we will and what we won't do. I think the jets, for example, from Poland, we should have just never said anything. We shouldn't have said the jets aren't going to transfer. We shouldn't have said we support the jets. We just shouldn't have talked about it. And candidly, I would have preferred that we do it. But we certainly shouldn't be saying that we won't put boots on the ground. I don't want to put boots on the ground, but you're better off not telling Vladimir Putin what you will and what you won't do, because every time you tell him what you won't do, you open up his board for him to do more things.
Yeah, I really want to talk about that. So many of the people I talk to in the security establishment are mortified by the way the Biden administration has telegraphed weakness, telegraphed our intentions, right from the early statement that maybe a minor incursion would be okay from Russia, to taking military off the table, to the misstep with Poland. Why can't this administration get the basics of diplomacy and peace through strength down? They seem like they stumble on it almost every day.
Well, and let's go back and let's remember the intelligence was good, John, and the intelligence was early. It was back in December, and the one thing that was done right is the declassification and the sharing of the intelligence. The thing that amazes me is that Joe Biden continued to operate as if Vladimir Putin was bluffing when the intelligence community was telling us in absolute terms that they thought that it was going to be a major incursion. And they were absolutely right. The only thing that really they didn't predict is I don't think anybody thought that Vladimir Putin was actually mad enough to send rockets into a nuclear power plant. But what the world has to understand right now is that we are dealing with an individual that's in control of one of the largest militaries in the world that is crazy enough to send rockets into a nuclear power plant. And so The world's got to come together. I do believe that the United Nations, not just NATO, but the United Nations needs to be having votes on a regular basis condemning Russia. I think that the world needs to see where China is, especially on this issue. And if China is going to stand behind Russia and support Russia, then corporate America needs to take note of that. And it's just as dangerous for corporate America to be backing up China and the Chinese economy as it was for them to be doing business in Russia and the Russian economy.
Congressman, the fertilizer crisis, as my co-host reported at Just the News, has the price of fertilizer has gone up to 500% for some farmers. So obviously that is a crisis and that trickles down to the purchaser. But the energy crisis, Joe Biden has hamstrung our U.S. energy producers, and he's going to Russia and he's going to Venezuela, and it seems like he's going everywhere except the answer's right there in front of him. It's right in front of his face. Just allow U.S. energy producers to resume their production. Are there people, you're up there on Capitol Hill, are there people within his own party who are giving him a little elbow in the ribs saying, come on, let's do this. Let's allow energy producers to do it here at home so that we're not dependent on Russia, on Iran, on Venezuela?
That's right. There are people in the Democratic Party that are pushing him on this, but there are not many of them that are willing to say it publicly. We did, in a very, very much a bipartisan manner, voted to ban Russian oil just a couple of days ago. That press came from both Democrats and Republicans who were willing to accept the fact that there would be an increase in the price of fuel at the pump. Most Americans knew this. Most Americans accepted this. What Joe Biden refuses to admit is that that price increase from banning Russian oil should have been from $2 to $3, not $4 to $5. And so Americans were paying a very steep price for the bad energy policy of the Biden administration before the war started. I mean, the war's only been going on about 3 weeks now, and he's blaming all of the problems on Vladimir Putin's invasion. And the majority of the problems were there before Vladimir Putin went in. Let's remember, Joe Biden did two things with regard to energy. He lifted the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and he canceled the Keystone pipeline. So he helped the Russians with regard to their ability to sell energy to Europe, and he hurt Americans by canceling the Keystone pipeline, which was going to bring energy from our neighbor and our friend Canada into the United States. So we should be, the Western Hemisphere should be totally independent. And when I say the Western Hemisphere, you can exclude Venezuela from that. But why would he do things that freed up the Russian pipeline and at the same time canceled the pipeline that was good for America and Canada?
All right, a lot of people are asking that question, Congressman. Today, the UN General Secretary said that there's a real possibility of nuclear war. You mentioned nuclear at the beginning. The question I get from a lot of people, has Putin changed? Has he become more unhinged? Is he sick? Or has American resolve weakened enough that he just feels more emboldened? He's the same guy, just with less concern about American response. What do you think it is? We have about a minute left.
I think it's a combination. And I think, he's gotten older. I think when he leaves the face of this earth, he wants people to line up and worship him. This is not a man who thinks rationally. Don't pretend that you can understand him. Don't pretend that you can negotiate with him. Again, this is someone who had rockets fired into a nuclear power plant. I don't know anybody else who is mad enough to actually try that. Fortunately, there has been no escape of radiation to date. That doesn't mean there won't be in the future. And he's just not somebody that Joe Biden should have thought that he could negotiate with by lifting sanctions on the Nord Stream 2. Somehow that was going to change Vladimir Putin's approach to the world. And Joe Biden was naive enough to think that he could negotiate with him and do those things.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Congressman. Well, we're going to watch a lot of history unfold over the next few weeks. I'm so glad you've been able to give us your insights. You've been one of the most rational voices on this crisis right from the beginning, and we're grateful for the time you spent with us today.
Thanks, John and Amanda.
Yeah, really glad to have you on. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Florida Atlantic University's Professor of Economics, William Luther. We got a lot to talk about in this economy, high inflation, a lot of head scratching. We're going to get to all of that right after these commercial messages.